You're watching TVC Breakfast. Now, globally, Nigeria falls within the range of 0.1 to 4.9% for women's representation in government, and it is at the bottom of the whole African continent in terms of representation of women into elective offices. Of Nigeria's more than 10 million out-of-school children, girls account for more than 70% in almost every aspect. It appears the odds are stacked against the female gender in Nigeria. This is why the United Nations, the Nigerian Senate, and female stakeholders are seeking support for the speedy passage of the Gender and Equal Opportunities Bill before the National Assembly. The bill, which has had a very long journey at the National Assembly, was first rejected in March 2016 when some male lawmakers argued that the Nigerian constitution was clear on the rights of citizens, including women. Other issues the bill championed by the senator representing Ekiti South, Biodun Olujimi, include land ownership, inheritance, education, employment, and sexual and gender-based violence. These are the crux of the issues we'll be talking about now. So joining me from our Abuja studio is the Director of Macarthur Foundation, Kole Shettima. It's nice to have you join me this morning, Kole.
Thank you very much for having me as well on this important day.
Great. Now, let's talk about this bill that has been at the National Assembly for some time. Of course, everyone is beginning to understand that things need to change. But if we have to put our finger on the issues, what will this bill change? What will change if this bill is passed into law?
Well, this is a bill that I think the analogy is to think about you have a 100 meters race, and then you have someone who has 2 legs, 2 feet, walking well, and then you have somebody who has is one-legged person, and then you want them to compete a 100-meter dash. Obviously, you know that the person with 2 legs has a bigger advantage than the person who is a one-legged person. And what therefore this bill wants to do is to remove and make it possible that these 2 people who are in this race are going to be 2 people with the same physical structure and physical abilities. So what it's trying to do, in other words, is that we want to ensure that we remove all the impediments. We want to remove all the difficulties and the challenges that more than 1/2 of our population, or about half of our population, are facing to enable them to participate in this 100-meter dash. So essentially that is what the bill is trying to do by creating the condition for equality. You don't treat unequal people as equal. And I think that our women, as a result of our patriarchal ideas of the discrimination that women are facing in our society, and therefore we cannot just simply say that they are equal as men, and therefore we should treat them equally. No, they are not equal as other people, primarily because the condition in which they have been brought up, the condition in which our society have treated our women is so unequal that it is unfair, it's unjust, it's not in the interest of the country, it's not in the interest of humanity for us to continue on discrimination against women, but more importantly, not to use the best of the opportunities that women present in bringing about the desired change that our country needs.
All right, now there has been talk about the implementation of laws in Nigeria, that the laws are not lacking at all. We have laws for almost everything, but the implementation is the crux of the issues. Now, if this law is passed and the issue of implementing the laws to the latter, especially we were talking about the issue of land ownership, issues around inheritance. We also know how culture has a hand in all of these things. What would change really if the law is passed yet the implementation is not there?
Well, thank you very much. I think that you have made 2 distinctions which are very important. One is passing of the law, and the other one is actual implementation. So I think that the first step is what we are now trying to achieve, which is how do we establish the law itself first. Now, if we're able to establish the law first, then we can worry about the implementation. Now, as far as the implementation is concerned, and that's where the bill also provides for accountability mechanisms. Accountability mechanism whereby, how do we ensure that what we have passed as a law is also being implemented as well. So I think that's why I think that that the part of the law itself is around what are the mechanisms to ensure that people who do not implement the law itself are also held accountable for not doing so as well. So that's why I think that for us at this stage, I think that it's very important to make sure that this law is passed. As you mentioned, this is a journey that that started a very long time ago, and we get it done. Then I think that we can also, part of the law itself, is to provide for how do we go about implementing it. And if there are people who do not implement the law, then I think that the law also provides for the mechanism on how do we hold these people accountable for not implementing the law. That is the law of the land itself. And there we have, I think, other many opportunities apart from the law itself. And I think that we have the judicial system that can also hold people accountable for not implementing what the law says in the country.
Okay. Now let's talk about the issue of orientation and attitudinal change and the approaches generally. Beyond the issue of the law, one would also say or agree with us that there has to be a reorientation of the men on one hand and also the women on the other hand, letting them know that they also have to be able to take the bull by the horn and not just wait to be served a la carte as the case may be. What would it take for that reorientation to happen when it comes to changing the narratives about bringing women on the table on equal basis?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think that I'm hoping that this set of National Assembly will write their members will write their names in the golden books of the world and the country. And I'm hoping that the president will also see this as part of his legacy. I hope that the Senate president and the Speaker of the House of Representatives will also see this as their own legacy that they are leaving for the country. And we get that one done, certainly, I think there's going to be a cultural reorientation, a cultural change. It's going to be a major change in terms of the cultural behavior, beliefs, and attitudes of our people, both, of course, on the part of men, but as you also rightly said, also on the part of the women as well. Now, this cultural change will not be easy. When you are used to doing certain things certain ways, and then tomorrow they say, okay, it's actually not the same way that you are going to do, and there are certain different ways of doing it, obviously, there will be resistance. And obviously, there are people who are going to feel that they are hurt or that their own privileges are being challenged, and that some of the things that they have been doing and they think that this is their right and other things are being questioned. And therefore, we expect that there will be resistance on the part of men and other things. But I think fundamentally, what this bill is trying to do is how do we take advantage of the 51% or 50% of our own population so that they can also contribute toward the growth and the development of our own country. Why is it that as a people, as a country, do we want to hold back the potentials of 50% of our population in our country? Obviously, we know that if we give women more opportunities, if we create the economic opportunities, if we remove some of the obstacles towards, for example, cultural practices that dehumanize them, if we remove some of the cultural practices that disenable them to participate equally in the opportunity, but also in terms of politics and other things, we know that at the end of the day, it is the country, the people that are going to benefit. And therefore, I think that kind of benefit I think is much more greater than the privileges that people are going to lose, and those privileges that have been entrenched that actually for so long it has actually contributed toward the underdevelopment of our society. It has contributed toward the downgrading of our society, and therefore this cultural change, this orientation that is going to happen, I hope that people will see it as part of their own contribution toward the greater growth and development of our society.
All right. Now, beyond what government making laws is one hand, and then the women themselves who are supposed to benefit from this is on the other. Well, if we have to take these steps towards achieving a situation where we have equal opportunity on the table, what are the practical steps that we all have to take, and who needs to take those steps?
Well, certainly, I think on the part of government, and I think there are a number of rules, some of our laws and practices that we have to change. For example, the question of land ownership, land inheritance, about residency, about intercultural marriage, and other things that we have to change. So, for example, we know that in our society, women who, although on one hand we want to promote national unity, national cohesion, and that's why we send people across the country to be in NYC members, and some of them fall in love and other things. And I think that is what is good for the people of our country and other things. But unfortunately, if people marry across the states around the society and other things, so what then happens is that unfortunately the woman is likely to be disadvantaged because on one hand she's seen as someone who was married outside of her state or ethnic group, and therefore she's not seen as eligible for some of the political positions that might arise, despite even if she's qualified. The same thing where she gets married, unfortunately they was also seen as an outsider. So it means that we have to look at some of these policies and others, and we know there are so many people who are judges and others who are qualified to go to national appointment, and others have been denied because they are seen as filling the quota of another state rather than another state as well. So it means that we have to take those practical things, like for example, putting emphasis on residence rather than state of origin, because the residents, as people who live and work and pay their taxes and for a number of years, we should give them the opportunity to do that. And I think that's what, for example, Kaduna State trying to do by modeling the way in which Nigerians can live together, and women will have a greater and better opportunity in Kaduna State than other places that we see in this country.
All right, there has been commendation for Rwanda in giving access to women, an opportunity for women in elective positions, the parliament and all of that. We are very far from the feat that Rwanda has achieved. But talk to us basically, how better off, or how better off can we be? Paint a picture for us so that we can understand the importance of bringing women on the table on equal basis.
Well, I think that one very, very good and very practical example is that if you look at the response to COVID in the world, you find that the countries that women were prime ministers and president had the best responses, whereas the big countries that had men as their presidents and head of state had the worst responses. That tells you just a good example of what is the difference that a women leadership can do. And look at the data in many of those countries that have men as their president, and the one that had women as president. The difference is very, very clear in terms of the responses and other things. So that is one just good example of how these things happen. But also that if you take the example of Rwanda that you have mentioned, we have seen Rwanda over the last. Rwanda was the country. Unfortunately, we used to think of them in terms of the 1 million or so of the genocide that have taken place in the place, and the number of deaths and the desiccation that has happened. But now, everyone is trying to run to Rwanda and try to see what Rwanda looks like. And I think the major reason is, one of the major reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the major reasons is the fact that women have been given a position of power and authority. And I think that there are certain qualities, innate qualities that I think women can bring into our politics that men like myself and like you do not have those kinds of values and qualities that they bring in other things. And I think that there is a recent study also done on corruption and political leadership and gender, and it's very clear what the evidence is telling us, that the countries that have more women in position of power and authority and others are less corrupt than the countries that have men in position of power and authority and other things. So there are so many, I think, reasons why I think that women should be in the position. That is in addition to the fact that it is their right as human beings to also be in a position of power.
All right. Now, as it is, let's even get into the tough of the women themselves. From your assessment, how ready are the women to take this responsibility headlong? The point there is, women, the number of women when it comes to voting or even just population, they have a very substantial amount of population. Whether I wouldn't say whether we're 50-50 or almost 50-50 as the case may be, but how ready are the women? Because they already have the numbers to make that change right now if they want to.
I wish it is as simple as you are suggesting, as if they are ready, they can get into a position of power and authority. It's not as simple as that one. I think that over the last 20 years or so about democratic experience, I think what we have really shown clearly is the continuous decline of, on one hand, I believe, of women in positions of in the National Assembly. But also important is also that, even progressive politics and people who really want to bring about change, they have been shortchanged in the system. What has happened in our political system is that, although, for example, in the last 2019 election, more women have actually emerged as aspirants in all the political parties, but especially in the smaller political parties. And why is it that it's so in the political party, in the smaller political? Because our political system, unfortunately, have been captured by dynasties, that have been captured in some ways that you may call mafiasco kind of politics, have been captured by people who are guns and bazookas and people who are willing to kill people, have been captured by people who have tons of money that they can spend in doing whatever they want to do and other things. And therefore, our politics has become so difficult, so impossible for people, and especially women, but also poor people in general, to really to penetrate into the political system itself, because of the people who have already captured our political system and have been extremely difficult for other people to come in. So although, yes, we have seen, for example, in 2019, more women have contested in the primaries, especially in the smaller political parties, but also in terms of the bigger political parties. But the reality is that the structures of our partisan politics, which is extremely monetized, I don't know if there is a word, violent. It has become so extremely violent. And so it has actually scared away a lot of people to participate in that process itself. And that's why, even though women, as I said, have actually shown a lot of greater interest in 2019, but you can see that at the end of the day, we had fewer women in our National Assembly, we had fewer women in the House of Representatives, because the money that you need in order to get into politics, the violence that is being committed in the process of our electoral process, the thuggery that is involved in our centers of political parties have scared so many men. So there's a structural problem. And that structural problem, that structural barrier is making it impossible and very difficult. And that's why I think that this bill that we are arguing for, which gives a force of law into it, but also there are two other proposals, I think, that are also on the table. One is the idea of special seats for women, so that we have in every state there is a special senatorial district that is created for women. The same thing in the House of Representatives, so that only women are should contest in those seats. So that will expand the voices of women to come into on the table to contribute to our national development. And then, of course, we have the gender and national policy, which provide for 35% in elective and appointing positions. And I think that if we can get the president and the leadership to push for the implementation of that by political parties, by government ministries, by governors, by the president, and even at the local government level, I believe that these are the ways in which we will be able to bring about some of those. Of course, some of this will be temporary position until a stage whereby women will be able to change the dynamics of our system and make it possible for more women to participate in the system.
All right. Now, before we go, let's talk about the issue of parenting, how they can make contributions from the infant stage where the girls are still children. How do we begin to imbibe this as a way of building a culture of independent mindedness in girls and building them up to become leaders right from the family level? Talk to us about this.
No, I agree that some of this cultural change that we are talking about, it also depends on the socialization that we give to our people, to our children, and other things. How do we treat our children? how do we bring them up? What kind of values, what kind of things do we do with them? So I think that the point you made is about the socialization process, and how do we impute in these our children the culture of treating them equally, but also and also trying to give them an opportunity to do that. And that part of that, I think, is how do we also bring up our male children, so that they don't become the monsters that we see in some of the men that we see in our society. So it is not just about what do we do about the girls, but I think it's important that we also focus upon the boys, because at the end of the day, it is the boys that will come up and enjoy the privileges that men enjoy, and therefore we have to I think we have to work with the boys, and we have to work with men to let them know that some of the things that they have taken for granted are essentially as a result of our cultural orientation, our socialization, and our upbringing that we do.
Okay.
And therefore, that I think that and the girls also have to be socialized and have to be cultural change in terms of what kind of behavior, what kind of attitude that we bring into them. So I think that.
All right, we have to leave it here now. Thank you so much. Kole Shettima, Director of Macarthur Foundation, thank you so much for your time and your insight into this. We look forward to a Nigeria where opportunity is given to every citizen, irrespective of your gender. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and for inviting me as well. Thank you.
Right.